Karen Smythe. Karen Smythe said that she was pleased with what she has seen from River's Edge, the developer.
Well, I was curious because River's Edge isn't even providing a proposal until December. So it would be interesting to find out what it is that Karen Smythe has been reviewing.
Just out of hand, isn't normally a declared surplus first?
Yes, when the city transferred the 1.3 acres to the university, they first had to go through the process of declaring that land surplus, having a public meeting, explaining why they were going to make it surplus and hand it over. What's interesting now is, even I'm not positive exactly where this lands, but the university has an agreement with the city to get 8 acres. The first thing any common sense person would do is say, well, what 8 acres are you taking? And if you're not taking it, tell us. Because the city is doing a lot of work and promising a lot of things on land that they've already promised to the university. And I gave the land for an institute that was supposed to be owned by the university. So there's a few questions that have to be ironed out, and then and only then would you go to somebody like River's Edge and say, put a proposal together. Because I went and visited with River's Edge. And they said, yeah, this costs a lot of money. Why would anybody spend money if it hasn't even been declared surplus?
And along that same track, isn't it normal to put out a request for proposals?
Yes, in fact, there was the meeting of the minds with the heritage groups, and everybody then thought the same thing. If you're going to say to one developer, put a proposal together and anybody else can, what you should be doing is issuing an RFP, and the city has done this many times. It's a request for proposals, and you say these are the guidelines, and everybody in Ontario or Canada is welcome to come down here and put together a fair proposal. You don't cherry pick somebody that nobody knows anything about. And I was surprised. When I went down to visit River's Edge, Wendy and I thought, well, we'll just go down and see them in Tilbury at their office. It was a garden center, and you couldn't get them on the phone. And you'll find that Dan at the All Candidates meeting said, well, I can give you the phone number. Well, there is a phone number in the north, but not at the address that they originally said.
I think that was in Tillsonburg too.
Yeah.
Now another quote from Karen Smythe, taxpayers should not pay for development.
Then Karen shouldn't have approved for an expropriation that makes the taxpayer obligated to do just that. And she should not have done it without a full plan in place prior to taking it.
And again with Karen, this is why I am confident now that the city has signed a memorandum of understanding with a developer that is interested in restoring and reusing all or part of the old building, that a solution can be found that appeases everyone involved.
The shops were being restored when Wendy and I owned them. They were also in use. They didn't have services, so the uses weren't much, but they were there. So if the only reason Karen is getting into this now is we just want to find somebody that'll build it out or fix it, she took the person that was spending his money and not costing you a dime and threw him off the site. The affidavit signed by the city said that they couldn't see the Ryans anytime soon getting the job done. They led the court to believe that that meant within a year or two. This is 6 years later. And 6 years later, they finally admit to the public, Ryan was right. We don't have any money, we have no plan. Now they're saying they won't even honor the agreement with the university if they're going to give it to River's Edge, unless they're going to tell River's Edge, this is the 8 acres that they're going to get. Now, as far as the solution is concerned, it has to include our rights of return. When I talked to River's Edge, they said we didn't even know that existed. So there's a lot of questions out there and a lot of players that have to come to the table for them to understand as well whether they even have a right to put a proposal in or get access to this land unless I agree and Wendy agrees.
And Bonnie Henderson continues that thought with saying, she's waiting on the report by River's Edge Developments due in December.
Well, in fairness, if Karen were to show everyone what she's seen from River's Edge, then I suppose we could all make a decision. But at this point, my understanding from River's Edge Development is they are sourcing other companies, because in the north, there are only one company that's involved in that project. So they're going to bring other parties together. In fact, they asked me if I wanted to work with them. I said no. I said, I'm just going to give the city notice that since they said they would give it to you or somebody else, they've approved Section 41 or triggered it, and I take the land back. And this is important. I already had Rosati hired as my general contractor. He was on the site with men. We had everything going, and the project would have moved forward at that time. Part of my claim in costs thrown away is to pay for the cost lost or paid for all of that work. So we already have designs. We already have an approved project. There's a building permit over there that was interfered with, but it's there. So considering the team that we had in place, and you're paying for that team and all that work, why would you go and say to River's Edge or somebody else, go get another team, spend the money again. We'll pay Ryan for his team, and then we'll pay you for your team. Well, that's ridiculous.
And to Lorraine Butson. She simply said the city cannot afford adaptive reuse.
Can't afford not to adaptively reuse it. If the OMB agrees that I only get contributory value, and then they were to agree that that $10 million should be paid by the citizens, when's the last time you wrote a check for $10 million and then said, oh, by the way, go out and smash it? I don't want to use it anymore. There's nobody would do that. Now, the council has already obligated the taxpayers to pay us for the shops. So even before you decided whether you'd take it down or not, shouldn't you find out what the bill's going to be? Now, if you take it down, I'm not sure I need to get into this too much because I think it's been covered a great deal by other groups trying to save the shops, but clearly demolition creates three problems. Loss of usable land. The city's own consultant said if you take it down, every square inch of building you take down, you can't build on it anyway. There's the cost of demolition. And then there's the obligation to return the shops to me. I want you to think about this. I have a letter in 2009 from the lawyers, from the city, because I told them, I'm not going to tell you whether you leave them up or down, because I said in the minutes of settlement, you could use it for what you want, and on the university, and if they're going to move in, or you're going to take part of it down. But I said I want it, and I brought this forward to the council on 3 or 4 occasions, because they started talking about demolishing the buildings. I said there's a steel structure there. The Riley report confirms that its replacement value is approximately $6 million. I can put that up anywhere else, and I can have my project relocated. I don't have to go out and rebuild that steel shell. To take it down is quite simple. You pop the rivets at the joints, and you take the pieces apart, and you put them up somewhere else, done all the time. Well, can you imagine having to pay us for the shops, then having to pay to take it down, then having to pay to truck it to me, then having to pay for me to put it back up in another town? And everybody that walks into them is going to say, where'd those come from? Stratford. It was their heritage. They didn't want it. But I don't want to lose it. I agree it should stay where it is. But this is the decision of the citizens of Stratford, not 11 people. So you decide how much you want to keep, how much you want to pay for it, and how much you want to give back. But I guarantee you, if you go to take it down and you're going to destroy it, I'll be the first one then to take you to court, or the council that's going to do that, and ask the judge to make them honor the understanding that I would get it back. Because under Section 41 it says, if you abandon the use, you got to hand it over.
And as a heritage person, I just want to emphasize again that if it's taken down, the railway gets 30 meters back from its property line, not from the railway track, but from its property line. And also a berm has to be constructed, and the berm is 15 meters wide and 2.5 meters high. And that takes out most of the parking that could be put there. Carrie McManus, she said, I think it's important that people feel there is someone who is open and willing to have a conversation. All councillors are obliged to be open and willing to talk.
I fully agree, but it isn't a matter of whether they're willing to or not. They're obligated to. They come to you and say, elect me. I'll be your spokesperson. I'll be fair. I can tell you with all sincerity, I can't get the council to talk to me. So if that's been going on for 17 years, scratch the list. Now, in fairness, Carrie is the one councillor who has been the most inquisitive and who has taken the trouble when I walk in a room to actually ask me some questions. Not goes as far as I would like it to go, but she's been the most open and the most willing. Now, in fairness, you'll see that Keith Cullen always comes up and shakes my hand. That's as far as that goes.
He shakes my hand too. Yes. As for the Cooper site, it's important that the community understand that it is not a question of the heritage value of the old shops, but of real estate, referring to the rail setbacks.
I would only add to that what we've been talking about, that that real estate includes the shops and you have to pay for that. But also there's a claim for heritage loss. And whether anybody else agrees or disagrees with the heritage value of the site, I want to impress upon you that out of my 20,000 documents, I've gone to a lot of trouble to arrange the museum, to arrange heritage trains come from Toronto, all based on rail heritage. My logo was Ryan's Railway Centre. We were going to make money off of the heritage. So whether you do or not is irrelevant. Whether the new council does or not is irrelevant. I was going to. Wendy was going to. The OMB is going to give us what we lost. Now, I think we can all agree that there's some heritage value now because it's been browbeat through the Stratford Heritage. You know, they've done all of the reports and things. And recently I saw in the paper where they say now that they're pushing for heritage designation. So that's one part of it. But if I was going to make a buck off of the heritage, because people would come from out of town to see these heritage shops, and that would drive business to the other businesses that I have on there, then I have economic value and income. And I'm claiming for it.
And our final quote for tonight from Graham Bunting. Any changes to Market Square should flow from a made-in Stratford solution and not from an out-of-town consultant. We're a smart city. We should be able to solve this ourselves.
Graham's right. But the same goes for the Cooper site. I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I was before council, and I gave him 2 notices about taking the land back. And it was a proposal, a resolution, an invitation. And I'm going to break it down. It said a little more than what I'm going to say tonight, but there's 2 points or 3 points that I want to make. Return the lands, obviously except for the 1.3 acres, and you don't have to pay for it. That's simple. Then you can make taxes. I have damages. I've been asked by a number of citizens, and so has Wendy since January this year, if we would take a tax credit. It's done in development all the time. In fact, the city of Stratford 100 years ago gave a 5-year tax credit to get the shops there in the first place. Short answer is yes, I'll take a tax credit. That means it's not being cash flowed by you. You don't have to go to into your pocketbook and have it onto your debt. We can agree on what is a fair number to be paid, and we can accept a tax credit for a good chunk of that. Now, there is some serious cash I want to get back because it's not sitting in my bank account anymore for monies that we took out of our pockets and spent. But if the tax credit deals with most of it and the land's given back, what we're now talking about is the site cash flowing itself, satisfying everybody, and all of the councillors who said they don't want the citizens to have to pay for it would be happy, and they'd be correct. But here's what happens if you don't do it. This litigation or valuation hearing and then litigation following it doesn't take care of it. I'm going to give you an estimate of what I think these costs are going to run based on what I understand has already been spent. Between $10 and $15 million if every issue has to be filed. And you have every right to go to the council and say, give us a straight answer. Are we going to spend millions of dollars on the lawyers? How much have we spent today? It's a fair question because you're the one paying the bill. It's a public process. Now, it's customary for litigation for people to say, well, the lawyers are telling us not to talk because it's going to hamper our case in court. Well, that's usually if there's liability issues. In this case, there is no liability issues. You're liable. That's it. That's the end of the day. We're only talking about how much do we have to argue about. So if you can't do that, then make a list of what you think in my claim is unreasonable or what the issues are and come to me and we'll walk through it. You don't have to wait for 11 people or their lawyers to figure out how to do this discussion. Now, if you have that kind of money that you can figure out for yourself, you're going to have to spend. That would satisfy Wendy and I with an interim payment to get this thing rolling. And it's important because even the monies that you have spent till today and another interim payment, you would eventually get back from the taxes that you would now be obliged or you could charge on the site because it's back in private hands. So Wendy and I would like to request that if the citizens of Stratford really want to resolve it, set up a citizens committee. We'll show up. Ask the councillors, the new councillors, anybody to show up. It can all be done without prejudice, but the time for heightened paperwork by the city is over. My 20,000 documents are going to be provided to anybody who asks a question about a specific issue. Obviously, nobody wants to read the whole file. But this is the start of the end. So if you have a question, I'll answer it. We'll upload it onto our website. And so you have the documents to support what I'm saying. So you'll have something to go back to the city and say, listen, if he's wrong, prove it. Give us something that he's not right on.